Goalies, arguably the most important position in sports. Goalies can be hard to predict, and their games can fluctuate from season to season. But today, I'll be looking at every NHL franchise's starting goalie for the 2023-24 season and ranking them in these tiers that I have for you right here. For this list, I'll be ranking these goalies based on their careers, potential, and which goalie I would likely take over all of the other ones. Now, before I get started, I post daily NHL and hockey-related content, and I do weekly tier lists like this one. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that now, and let's get right into it. Now, there's no actual organization to this list. I'm just going to go as the teams are aligned right here, and the first on the list is the Chicago Blackhawks with their starting goalie Peter Mrazek. Surprisingly, Mrazek has been really good with the Blackhawks this year. He has a .909 save percentage and a 2.99 goals against average on a very, very bad Chicago team. Career-wise, Mrazek has always been a dependable goalie, but as a starter, I don't think he is the game changer or the guy that would solely lead you to a Stanley Cup. I believe Mrazek would thrive on a team that tandems their goalies. For me, I respect Mrazek and how hard he has worked through his career. I'll put him in the tandem goalie category. I think that would be the best situation for a goalie of his caliber. Up next is rookie Devin Levi, who has had a rocky start to his NHL career. Over 20 games this year, Levi has a .891 save percentage and a .330 goals against average, and for me, it's just way too early to judge this situation. Levi will be a good starter, but with a struggling Buffalo team and the first season jitters kicking in, I can't really make a sound prediction on what I think he will be in the future. I'll put him in the too soon to judge category. I think I need to see a little bit more from him before I can make a prediction on his game. Next on this list is Connor Hellebuyck, one of the most consistent and elite goalies in the NHL, and there's no debate on this. Without Hellebuyck, the Jets would be a completely different organization. Helly is putting up Vezina numbers this season with a .925 save percentage and a 2.21 goals against average. Career, he has a .917 save percentage and a 2.62 goals against average. He's a workhorse in Winnipeg and has been the clear starter for them since he joined the organization. You'll have a hard time finding a guy more consistent or level-headed in my opinion. He's a top 3 goalie every year, so let's place him in the best category. This next one includes two guys. The Boston tandem is easily the most elite set of goalies league-wide. Both Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark have been the best goalies in the NHL since the start of last season, and I think both of these guys are capable of taking on a starter role. Swayman has a .920 save percentage and a 2.49 goals against average, and Ullmark has a .913 save percentage and a 2.72 goals against average following his Vezina winning performance last year. This is a 2-for-1, like I said. I think any team would love to have one of these guys as their starter, so I'm going to place both guys in the elite category. They've earned that spot over the past few seasons. This next one is actually a lot harder than I thought. Adin Hill surged onto the scene last season, helping Vegas win their first Stanley Cup. In the offseason, he signed a new extension, and people questioned whether or not he would be able to continue the dominance he had last postseason. Hill's numbers are great this season, but there is a bit of a catch. He has a .927 save percentage and a 2.27 goals against average, but he's been injured for most of the season, so he's only played 23 games. I think it would be disrespectful to place him anywhere lower than the elite tier. I think there's a chance that he falls on this list, but his numbers are undeniable right now, so I have to give him some respect and put him in that tier. With the best defense in the league, playing as a starter in Colorado has to be the best gig in the NHL, and for Alexander Georgiev, it's been a bit up and down. Georgiev gets a ton of wins with the Avs, but his numbers are a bit lower than you might think. In 48 games as a complete workhorse, Georgiev has a .899 save percentage and a 2.92 goals against average with 30 wins. Georgiev as an undrafted goalie is a nice story in Colorado, and I believe his numbers would be a bit better if the Avalanche got him a backup so he didn't have to play almost every night. I think Georgiev belongs in the solid starter category. I've seen enough to believe that he can control the net for any team as a starter, and I believe he belongs in this tier. Up next is the Tampa Bay Lightning and their starter Andrei Vasilevskiy. I honestly believe he's one of the more disrespected players in this league. Vasilevskiy is the most clutch goalie in the NHL, but lately he's been dealing with a lot of injuries, which is why his numbers have gone slightly down through the past season and the start of this year. Vasi did miss some time this season due to the back surgery that he had in the offseason, but right now he's posting some decent numbers with a .897 save percentage and a 2.95 goals against average, and that should go up because he's just recovering from the back surgery, which is hard to come back for any player. Like I said, his numbers are low, but I think he's a number one guy, and I would take him over anyone else in the playoffs, so I'm going to put him in the best category. I think we're not seeing his best game right now, but we all know what Vasilevskiy is capable of. Now, what a fun story it's been for Cam Talbot out in LA. Gets the All-Star nod this year, has great numbers, and becomes the #1 option for the Kings. But how consistent is his play, especially since the start of the new year? Well, now Talbot has a .913 save percentage and a 2.53 goals against average with 16 wins in 35 games played. The tough thing here is that Talbot is 36 years old and on the back end of his career. I think right now he is in the same category as Georgiev. He's a good starter and can put up solid numbers for any team. He's a reliable guy, so solid category it is for Cam. The Philadelphia Flyers recently had a switch at their starting goalie, making Samuel Ersson the current starter. Ersson has played well with the Flyers in his 32 games played, averaging a .900 save percentage and a 2.56 goals against average. I think there isn't much to really say here. He's 24 years old and has done a nice job, but it's nothing special at the moment. I can't place him any higher than Mrazek. I don't think he's better than him. I do think he's slightly worse, so I'm going to place him in the same tier just because I feel like his potential is about the same as Mrazek. Now, before we get into the Washington Capitals, I realize that it might be Charlie Lindgren as their starter at this point, but I still believe that Darcy Kuemper is getting paid the most money, so we should talk about him. Now, Kemper's tenure in Washington has been underwhelming, but that's not his fault. Kuemper is a system goalie. He's not the kind of guy that lifts up a team, and we all know this. Washington needs a game changer, someone who will steal them a few wins when the rest of the team is dragging. So this is just a poor marriage between the goalie and the team. Put Kuemper in a system like Colorado and you can see him thrive. I consider him a fringe starter. I think in the right place he can excel, but otherwise he tends to struggle. Not a bad tier to be in, especially if you just want a Stanley Cup. I think Kuemper is the exact definition of a fringe starting goalie. Up next is the Columbus Blue Jackets and Elvis Merzlikins. This one is complicated. I really love the potential of Elvis, but hate the fit for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Just looking at his numbers though and how he's being paid, I just can't justify putting him any higher than Mrazek. I think he does have more potential than the other guys in this category, but with this season having a .902 save percentage and a 3.29 goals against average, you can't really place him any higher than this. His numbers just aren't representing his potential. Elvis is 29 years old and this is supposed to be his prime. He recently requested a trade, so I would love to see him playing on another team to get a more accurate look at his game, but right now he's a tandem system guy. I don't think I can trust him as my starter alone. Next is the Minnesota Wild and their starter Filip Gustavsson. What a tough year it's been for Gus. Coming off a very promising year with the Wild, Gus was extended and since then he's just not been good. He has an .896 save percentage and a 2.23 goals against average, which compared to last season is a massive drop off. This ranking might surprise people, but I think Gus is way better than the numbers that he's putting up this season. I believe most people would have him as a tandem guy, but I think he's in the fringe starter category. I saw flashes of his game last year and he would be way higher if he replicated even close to those numbers, but at the moment I feel like this is where he belongs. Usually when it comes to Carolina we'd be talking about Anderson, but right now with his injury, Kochetkov has really stepped up as their starter. He has a .910 save percentage and a 2.36 goals against average. During his 30-game stretch, I've seen solid performances from him and believe he's a great NHL starter. I think it's about time Carolina enters a new era of goaltending, and I think Kochetkov will be the center of it for years to come. If you haven't seen him play yet, go check out some of his performances. He's such a fun guy to watch. Another guy who has lost their starting job this year is Carell, but most people consider him to still be the starter based on the money that he's earning, so even with the surge of Connor Ingram, we're going to be talking about Carell today. At this point in his career, I think Carell is at least a tandem goalie, but I might actually put him in the backup spot. His numbers are just not great, and that could be because the Coyotes aren't great either, or it could just mean that he isn't really a true starter in the NHL. I would consider him to be a high-end backup at this point. I would love to see him get a chance somewhere else to see if maybe it's just the system that he's working with, but I can't justify putting him any higher on this list based on the numbers that he's put up. Despite having a rough start to the year, Shesterkin to me is still the best goalie in the NHL. Every goalie goes through their ups and downs, and that includes Igor. Since the All-Star break, it looks like he's found his game again, which is great for this Rangers team that's already leading the Metro. I'm not a Rangers fan before people start chirping me in the comments. I just know a good goalie when I see one, and to me, Shesterkin is one of the best right now. Put him in the best category, that's where he's going for me. This one may get controversial. Next up is the Toronto Maple Leafs and Ilya Samsonov. Let me just say this, I believe in Samsonov even with these brutal numbers. An .883 save percentage and a .218 goals against average. And look, to me, Sammy has been a tandem guy since he's entered the league. When he was with Vitek in Washington, he was great as a 1B, and now I think Toronto needs to move forward with that in mind. It would be unfair for me to put him any higher than the tandem tier. I believe he is better than the numbers that he's putting up this year, and I hope he can turn things around. I'm rooting for you, Sammy, but right now you're going in the tandem tier. The only goalie that some people consider to be better than Shesterkin is Sorokin, and rightfully so. Sorokin, like Shesterkin, is having a bit of a down year by his standards, but I still believe he's one of the world's best goaltenders. Without Sorokin, the Islanders wouldn't be sniffing a playoff spot, and I think he's the kind of guy that steals games and elevates a team. This ranking is easy, he's in the best tier. The question is, who would you rather have, Shesterkin or Sorokin? To me, another disrespected goalie in the NHL is Jacob Markstrom. He's not the best of the best, but he's in the elite tier in almost every category of his game. He continues to play at a high level even on teams that aren't performing well. And just look at his numbers this season. He has a .914 save percentage and a 2.58 goals against average, and has switched into a whole new gear for the Flames since the All-Star break. I've always been a big fan of his, and I feel like at the deadline he could be moved, so I hope he can continue to find success and eventually earn his first Stanley Cup. I'm putting Markstrom in the elite tier. Up next is the Montreal Canadiens, who by the way are still paying Carey Price that fat contract, but that's besides the point. Right now Jake Allen is the starter for the Habs, and I feel like he's just a tier above Tandem. I think Allen is just like Kemper. He's a reliable guy in a good system, but when the system isn't strong, then the results aren't exactly what they need to be. Allen has a .892 save percentage and a 3.68 goals against average this season, which, like I said, isn't exactly what you want if you're a rebuilding Montreal team. Allen, for me, belongs in the fringe starter category. Maybe we will see him on a contending team this season if he gets traded before the deadline. Next up is a very exciting up-and-coming goalie to watch, Jake Oettinger. Otter has become a star in just a few seasons after his incredible performance in Calgary just a few years back in the playoffs, and like some of the other elite guys this year, Otter has struggled a bit, posting a .903 save percentage and a 2.92 goals against average. Not exactly up to Otter's usual standards, but still, you'll have a hard time finding a guy who is as technically sound as Otter to be your starting goalie. Now, I wouldn't put him in the best of the best just yet. I think he's just slightly below the four guys above him, so I'll put him in the elite tier. Next up is another goalie whose performance is more about circumstances and the team that they play for, not really about their game. John Gibson once was seen as a top 5 goalie, but in Anaheim he's just regressed over the past few seasons. He has a career .911 save percentage and a 2.85 goals against average with the Ducks. I think it's time for Gibson to go to another franchise and get the nod as a starter somewhere else. I believe the Ducks will look to trade him either this season or the next, but I can't justify putting him in the elite tier even though I think his game is much better than what we're seeing in Anaheim. I think if you put Gibson on a team with a better defense, he would be a legitimate elite goalie, but for right now, I'm going to put him a tier below that. In the offseason, the Ottawa Senators went all in signing Joonas Korpisalo, and since then, he's just not been the starting goalie they had hoped for. An .888 save percentage on the year with a 3.39 goals against average, which just won't work for any NHL team. Korpisalo was a tandem guy in Columbus, and I feel like that's where he thrives. I'll put him in the tandem tier as well. I think he has the potential, but this is his third chance as a starting job, and he continues to fall short of expectations. This next one is interesting. If we were ranking the biggest pests in the NHL, then Binnington would be a lot higher on this list. Unfortunately though, we're ranking goalies based on their performances, and well, Binnington has been underwhelming since his cup run back in 2019. Over the past few years, his underwhelming performances has led to a lot of competition in the crease that could push him into a lesser role. Binnington actually is not all that bad, but I just don't think he's with the elite crowd. I think it would be disrespectful to put him any lower than the fringe starter. I think he shows flashes of skill and has some nice performances, but I'm just not all that high on his game, and clearly he can help teams win a cup, so I think he's at least earned this spot. Next up are the Nashville Predators and UC Saros. Saros, in my eyes, is elite. I consider him to be one of the best and elite starters in the NHL, and he's been that for the past few seasons. I firmly believe that he's the backbone of this Predators team, and without him, their record would look very, very different. There are some rumors of him being traded at this year's deadline, and if he ends up on a contending team, then I will invest a lot of stock in that roster, because he's the kind of guy that will steal a team games. Putting him in the elite category, this one's easy. Saros is a beauty. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. The San Jose Sharks are rebuilding and currently just using 2 guys who are fringe backups. They've shown some flashes, but for me, neither is really a starter, so I'll quickly place them both in the backup role. I think we all can agree that's where they belong. Now at this point, I believe Joey Dackard has taken the starting job for Seattle, but for the video's sake, let's talk about Grubauer since he's making more money. Philip Grubauer, since joining the Seattle Kraken, has yet to have a season above a .900 save percentage and is incredibly inconsistent. Even though Grubauer showed some flashes during last year's playoffs, I just don't believe he's a starter anymore, and I'm going to place him in the tandem category. I believe he would be a great second option for any team that's splitting time in net. I just don't believe he deserves a starting job anymore. You have to put up better numbers, otherwise this is where you belong in the tandem tier. Easily my favorite storyline from the season is the resurgence of Sergei Bobrovsky, earning the most money by any goalie who is currently playing in the league. Bobby has been unpredictable in the playoffs, and he knows how to turn things on at given moments. However, he's been inconsistent and has not exactly lived up to the contract that he signed with Florida. Right now, I would trust Bobrovsky, but a month from now, who knows? I wouldn't call him elite, but I will put him in the solid starter category. Another juicy one here, Stuart Skinner and the Edmonton Oilers. At this moment, he's playing so well, but as a whole, Stuart Skinner is very inconsistent, and I don't know if I trust him at this point. To be fair, Skinner is very young, and this is his first real season as a starter, but right now I can't put him any higher than fringe starter. Now, before you get all angry Oilers fans, just wait for the postseason. If Skinner can perform at a consistent level for the rest of the season and the playoffs, then I'll bump him up, but for now, I still have some trust issues from last year and the start of this year. This one is well deserved. Thatcher Demko has been slept on for a long time, probably because the Vancouver Canucks haven't been the most exciting team to watch for the past few seasons, but regardless, he's having his best season in his career with a .917 save percentage and a 2.47 goals against average this year, and leading the Canucks to a potential division winning record. I've always loved Thatcher's game, and I felt like he had the potential to really surge at any given moment, and lately I've just loved seeing him be successful in Vancouver, so I'm going to put him in the elite spot. That's where he belongs. Well deserved, Thatcher. Next up is Tristan Jarry, and he gets a lot of mixed reactions on most people's list. Jarry's biggest problem is that he's prone to injury, but when he's actually playing, I think he's a good starter. Now, no one considers him to be a game changer, but he's reliable and can be consistent for the Penguins, especially when their defense is lacking. Now, he's a good goalie on a somewhat below average Penguins team. I'm going to put him in the solid starter category. I think he's a really good goalie and could really excel if he was playing on a team with just a little bit better defense. Now, this next one is a bit interesting to me. I was big on Husso in St. Louis, and I thought a lot of his potential. I actually really liked the fit in Detroit when he signed there as well, but unfortunately things just haven't really worked out for him since he became the starter there. A .892 save percentage and a 3.55 goals against average this year, and he's now splitting the job with Alex Lyon, who surprisingly has been really pleasant for Detroit. I wouldn't call Husso a backup. I think he's a bit better than that, but I do believe his best chance at being a somewhat starter would be in a tandem role like he was in St. Louis. Husso's inconsistent play is what knocks him down to the tandem tier, but I am rooting for him. I think he has a lot of time and potential to get things back on track and should get another try at being a starter. I'm interested in seeing who the Red Wings are going to start in the postseason if they end up making it though. Last on this list is the New Jersey Devils and Vitek, and let me just say I've never been really high on him. To me, just like Samsonov, he works best in a tandem system, and still I believe Sammy has a bigger upside. Right now he's injured with the New Jersey Devils and they're playing their best hockey without him. It's not to say that he's a bad goalie, but he folds in the playoffs and just isn't a reliable number one option in my opinion. I think I have to put him in the backup tier. I just think that he will never really be a true starting goalie again. Even if he comes back for New Jersey, I don't even know if he's going to be their backup at this point. Place him in the backup tier. I think that that's a good spot for him. But this is my NHL starting goalie tier list. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully I touched on everyone in the league. And hey, comment other NHL and hockey related tier lists you would like to see in the future. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.